Khanh Vi sat quietly on a wooden chair at her favorite coffee shop, her eyes fixed on the phone screen, but her mind was completely blank. The glass of iced milk coffee in front of her had nearly melted, yet she had no desire to take another sip. Her mother's words from this morning kept echoing relentlessly in her mind. You're almost 30 and still not married. Do you intend to keep making me lose face with the neighbors? Every time her mother mentioned marriage, Vi felt suffocated, as if someone were tightening a noose around her neck. It wasn't that she didn't want to get married, but after everything that had happened, how could she possibly move forward? 2 years ago, Khanh Vi had thought she would spend her whole life with Thành Nam, her boyfriend of many years. He always appeared like the perfect gentleman, with a charming smile, sophisticated demeanor, and a way of speaking that easily won people's trust. But in reality, it was all just a facade. Nam didn't love Vi as much as she had believed. This truth became painfully clear the day Vi told him she was pregnant. You're going to be a father, Vi said, trying to suppress her nervousness. However, Nam just stared at her, his eyes, once warm and bright, now cold as ice. After a few minutes of silence, he uttered a sentence that shattered her heart. Vi, I'm not ready. You'll have to handle this yourself. Vi could still vividly recall that moment. Her heart felt as if it were being crushed. She had hoped Nam would change once the child was born, but he vanished shortly after, without a single word of explanation. Every call and message from Vi was blocked. For the past 2 years, Nam had completely disappeared from her life. Vi had learned to live without expecting anything from Nam anymore, but the baby was a different story. The child was all that remained from a relationship in which she had placed her entire trust. She couldn't abandon it, even knowing that this decision would turn her life upside down. This morning, Vi's mother noticed her frequent nausea and fatigue. Being perceptive, she immediately questioned Vi. Is there something you're hiding from me? You've been acting strange lately. Vi could only shake her head, trying to conceal her anxiety. But Mrs. Huang was not one to let things slide easily. You know that I won't tolerate anything that could tarnish our family's reputation. If there's something wrong, I hope you'll tell me directly right now. The pressure weighed so heavily on Vi that she could barely breathe. Using the excuse of going out to escape her mother's scrutinizing gaze, Khanh Vi knew all too well that she couldn't hide the truth forever. That evening, she rode her motorbike around the streets of downtown. The night and the shimmering streetlights did little to soothe the anxiety swirling inside her. Suddenly, while stopped at a red light, a wave of nausea hit her. Vi pulled over to the side of the road, trying to take deep breaths to calm herself. Unfortunately, her foot slipped, causing the bike to topple over. Right at that moment, a man riding a motorbike nearby stopped and quickly helped her lift the bike. He was wearing a faded green jacket and an old helmet. His eyes sincere as he asked, "Are you okay? Do you need any help?" Vi shook her head, not wanting to attract attention, but just as the stranger was about to leave, she blurted out, "Could you give me a ride home? My bike's broken." The man, Quang Min, was a ride-hailing driver who had just finished his shift. He usually didn't take any more passengers at this hour, but when he looked at Vi, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. "Hop on," Min said, softly. On the way home, Vi sat quietly on the back of the old motorbike. The streetlights shimmered, reflecting off the rain puddles. Min drove cautiously, occasionally glancing back to ask, "If you're cold, I have a spare raincoat." That simple kindness made Vi feel an unexpected sense of security, something she hadn't felt in a long time. When they reached her house, Vi suddenly turned around and asked, "What's your name?" "Quang Min," he replied, his voice slightly surprised. "Why do you ask?" He was silent for a few seconds, as if a bald idea had just formed in her mind. She looked at Min and said, "I need to ask you for a favor." Min frowned, confused. "What kind of favor?" Vi took a deep breath, her eyes filled with determination. "I need you to pretend to be my husband for 2 years." Her words left Min stunned. He didn't know how to respond, but Vi's eyes showed no sign of jest. In just a few short moments, Min realized that the woman in front of him was hiding a big secret, and this proposal could completely change his life. Quang Min stood frozen, shocked by Khanh Vi's unexpected proposal. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the rustling of leaves in the wind outside her house. Min looked into Vi's eyes, trying to find a sign that she was joking, but her gaze was so serious that it left him confused. "Are you serious?" Min asked, his voice slightly hoarse with surprise. "I am completely serious," Vi nodded, her face calm, but her hands subtly tightened as if trying to suppress some emotion. "I know this proposal is very strange, but I really need your help." Min took a small step back, caution evident on his face. "But why me? We don't even know each other." Vi bit her lip, her eyes glancing quickly toward the gate as if fearing someone might appear and overhear their conversation. After a few moments of hesitation, she spoke softly, almost pleadingly. You don't need to know everything. I'll pay you 300 million VND for 2 years. All you need to do is pretend to be my husband in front of my family, neighbors, and everyone around. After that, we'll go our separate ways. I promise, I won't bother you anymore. Min was stunned by the amount. For a ride-hailing driver like him, 300 million VND was a fortune, enough to cover the medical bills for his mother, who was being treated for cancer at the provincial hospital. But the thought of pretending to be the husband of a stranger made him anxious. He was not used to getting involved in such complicated matters. You make it sound so easy, Min said, looking directly at Vi, his voice lowering. But do you realize this will bring a lot of trouble? No, I don't like trouble, especially when my mother is sick. At the mention of her mother, Vi flinched slightly. She stared at Min, trying to read the emotions in his eyes. You need money for your mother's treatment, don't you? Min frowned, not responding, but the way he turned his face slightly said it all. Vi sighed, her voice becoming gentler. I don't want to force you, but if you agree, I promise this money will help you get through this hardship. As for me, I just need someone to be by my side for now. Min looked at her, suspicion filling his eyes. A part of him felt sympathy for the woman in front of him. There was something in V's eyes that made him realize she was carrying a heavy burden. But another part of Min was still filled with anxiety. Was this really safe? Was she hiding something from him? I don't understand, Min said, trying to keep his voice steady. If you're rich enough to pay 300 million VND, why would you hire someone like me? You could easily find someone better. Vi chuckled softly, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. Because you know nothing about me and have nothing to do with my life. The wealthy people you mentioned would only make things more complicated. I need someone truly simple, with no hidden motives. Her answer made Min pause. She was right. He was a man who had nothing to lose and no schemes of his own. But this, Min felt like he was stepping closer to the edge of something far too big to handle. I need more time to think, Min said after a long silence. This is not as simple as you think. Vi nodded, a hint of disappointment in her eyes, but she did not insist. All right, take your time, but I hope you'll answer soon. I don't have much time left. She turned and walked into the house, leaving Min standing there with a whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. Her small yet determined figure seemed to carve itself into his memory. There was something about her, the loneliness, the eyes filled with secrets, that made it hard for him to refuse. Min drove home in a daze. When he opened the door to his cramped little room, he saw his mother sleeping on the old bed, her face pale, her lips colorless. Min sat down beside her, took her hand, and felt the faint warmth that remained. He sat there for a long time, thinking about Vi's offer. 300 million VND? It was not a small amount. That money could help his mother continue her treatment, free her from the relentless pain. But could he really get involved in something so complicated? All night, Min tossed and turned on the thin mattress. He remembered Vi's eyes when she spoke of needing someone by her side. Maybe, just like his mother, Vi was also fighting a pain that no one could understand. The next morning, Min picked up his phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed Vi's number. When her voice came through from the other end, he took a deep breath and said, I agree. Vi was silent for a few seconds before softly replying, thank you. Min did not know that from that moment on, his life would take a completely different path, one full of challenges, but also no less meaningful. Khanh Vi stood in front of the gate, her heart heavy with emotions as she watched Quang Min step off his old motorbike. He carried a small backpack on his shoulder, his face calm, but with a hint of awkwardness. Vi stepped forward, nodding slightly in greeting. Are you sure about this? If you want to change your mind, there's still time, she said, her voice low but resolute. Min was silent for a moment, his eyes glancing at the spacious two-story house behind Vi. From the gate, it already exuded a luxury he was unfamiliar with. I've already agreed, there's no turning back now, right? He smiled faintly, but his smile couldn't hide the tension. That's right, Vi replied, leading Min into the house. As soon as he stepped into the living room, Min was immediately overwhelmed by the suffocating atmosphere. Mrs. Huang, Vi's mother, sat on the sofa with a cold glare. Beside her was Kan Huang, Vi's younger brother, who didn't bother to conceal his disdainful expression when he saw Min. Who are you? Mrs. Huang spoke, her voice not loud but carrying enough authority to make Min freeze. Vi quickly interjected, Mom, this is Kan Min, the one I told you about. We've decided to get married. Those words were like a bomb exploding in the living room. Mrs. Huang slammed her teacup down on the table, her eyes narrowing as she looked Min up and down. What? What did you just say? This man is your fiancé? Yes, I'm serious, Vi replied firmly. He's the one I chose. I don't want to hear any more objections. Mrs. Huang burst into laughter, a bitter, mocking kind of laugh. You chose a man who works as a motorbike taxi driver, so poor he only has that old motorbike, and you dare to call that a choice? Are you joking with his family? Kan Huang, sitting beside her, smirked. Sis, at the very least you could have found someone decent, but a man like him? That's enough! Vi raised her voice, her eyes blazing with anger. I don't care about his background or his job. What matters is that I feel safe when I'm with him. Even if the family disapproves, I will still move forward. Min stood silently, feeling like he had just stepped into a battlefield without any preparation. He bowed his head, his hands gripping the straps of his backpack tightly, silently reminding himself that this was all just pretend. There was no need to take it too seriously. Mrs. Huang looked at her daughter, her face showing a hint of anger, but she quickly regained her composure. If you've made your decision, I won't stop you. But don't blame me if you regret it later, she said coldly. When the two returned to Vi's room, the tension in the house was still palpable. Min sat down on the edge of the bed, letting out a weary sigh, his eyes betraying his exhaustion. You didn't tell me that your mother was this difficult, he said, his voice heavy with frustration. Vi chuckled softly, a bitter smile playing on her lips. If I had told you, would you have agreed? Min didn't answer. Instead, he gazed out the window, feeling as if he had been swept into a whirlwind with no way out. But thinking of his mother lying in the hospital, he reminded himself that he was doing all this for her. He couldn't afford to back out now. Vi watched him from across the room, her eyes softening. I'm sorry, things are more complicated than you thought, but I really have no other choice, she admitted. Min turned back to look at Vi, his voice low. I don't blame you. I'm not sure I can play this role well. You can, Vi replied firmly. We just need to act the part. I'll take care of everything else. In the first days of living with Vi's family, Min could clearly feel the coldness and contempt from Mrs. Huang and Kan Huang. Mrs. Huang frequently showed her disdain, from ignoring him at meals to making sharp, sarcastic remarks. Mr. Min, do you even know how to hold chopsticks properly? This family isn't used to sloppy table manners, she said icily. Huh. Min only smiled faintly, choosing not to react. He knew he had no right to argue back. However, it was Kan Hong's gaze that unsettled Min the most. Hong always found ways to make things difficult, from purposely assigning him trivial tasks to constantly mocking him in front of others. A guy like you must be dreaming of striking it rich by stepping into this house. Huh? Playing sneered during one encounter when he found Min cleaning the garage. Min didn't respond, silently continuing his work. But deep down, those words stung more than he wanted to admit. Vi noticed this. One evening after everyone had gone to bed, she quietly stepped out to the backyard where Min was sitting on the steps. Are you okay? She asked. Gently, Min turned around, a bit surprised by her presence. I'm fine, just not used to how things are here, he admitted. Vi sat down beside him, her eyes fixed on the night sky. I know my family isn't easy to deal with, but I promise I won't let you bear this alone, she whispered. Vi's eyes at that moment brought Min a sense of comfort. Despite how difficult everything was, he knew he was not alone. In the following days, Min began trying to adapt. He diligently took care of small tasks around the house, from fixing leaking pipes to helping the housekeeper clean the garden. Gradually, some of the household members started to change their attitude. The oldest housekeeper, who used to be cold toward Min, unexpectedly said, Mr. Min, you're really hardworking. If you need anything, just let me know. Min gave a slight nod, feeling as if he had made a small step forward. However, he was fully aware that the path ahead was still long and full of challenges. That morning, the atmosphere in the house became more suffocating than ever. Mrs. Huang sat on the sofa, her face cold as she flipped through a stack of papers. It was the marriage contract between Khanh Vi and Kwang Min, something she had accidentally found in Vi's drawer while cleaning. Her eyes blazed with intense anger and disappointment. Vi, get down here right now, she called out, her voice powerful enough to make the entire house tremble. Khanh Vi had just come down from upstairs, barely having time to react before her eyes fell on the stack of papers in her mother's hand. Her whole body froze, feeling as if she was being pulled into an abyss. Mom, where did you get that? Her voice was shaky, but she tried to remain calm. Don't ask. Explain yourself. Mrs. Huang threw the papers onto the table, her tone so cold that it sent a shiver down Vi's spine. A marriage contract? What kind of joke is this, Vi? Did you really think you could deceive me? Kan Huang, sitting nearby, immediately stood up, grabbed the contract, skimmed through it, and then turned to Vi with a look of utter disdain. You hired him to be your husband? Is this for real? Kan Huang took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice as steady as possible. Yes, it's true. That brief answer was enough to leave both Mrs. Huang and Kan Huang stunned. The air in the room seemed to freeze until Mrs. Huang sprang up from her seat, her eyes burning with fury. Vi, I can't believe you would do something like this. I've spent my whole life teaching you to live with integrity and preserve the family's honor, and now you've brought this disgrace upon me? Mom, I didn't do this to shame you, they choked out, her voice trembling. Vi responded, her voice hoarse. I did it because I had no other choice. No other choice? What are you talking about? Mrs. Huang snapped, stepping closer to Vi. Vi lowered her head, her eyes glistening with tears. This was the moment she dreaded the most, yet it was unavoidable. Mom, I'm pregnant, and I don't want anyone, not even you, to decide the fate of my child or mine. The entire room fell into absolute silence. Kan Huang was stunned, and Mrs. Huang staggered back as if she had been struck hard. What? What did you just say? She whispered, her eyes wide with shock. Vi took a deep breath, looking straight into her mother's eyes. I'm pregnant, Mom. The child is mine, and I want to keep it. But I know you would never accept me having a child without a husband. That's why I asked Min to pretend to be my husband so you wouldn't have to worry about what people might say. Mrs. Huang was speechless, her face frozen in disbelief. After a few seconds of silence, Kan Ho-hang burst into laughter, but there was no joy in his voice. How ridiculous! Do you really think that a simple contract can hide the truth forever? And what about the child? How do you plan to explain that to everyone? Or are you going to make up another fake story? Enough, Ho-hang. Vi turned to her brother, her voice weary. This is between me and Mom. You don't need to get involved. Not get involved. Do you even realize what you're doing? You're turning this whole family into a laughingstock, Huang snapped, his voice filled with fury. You think I don't know that? Vi shouted, her voice cracking under the pressure she had been holding in for so long. You think I wanted everything to turn out like this? But I had no other choice, Huang. I just wanted to protect my child. Quang Min, who had been standing silently at the door, finally stepped into the room. He glanced around the tense room, his eyes meeting V's, who was trembling, trying to hold herself together. Min took a deep breath and spoke, his voice low but steady. Everything that happened was my idea. If you want to blame someone, blame me. But I hope you can respect Vi's decision. She didn't do this to disgrace the family. She's just trying to protect what matters most to her. Both Mrs. Huang and Kan Huang turned to look at Min, their eyes still full of suspicion and anger. Do you think you have the right to speak here? Mrs. Huang's voice was cold and sharp. You're just someone hired to play a role, nothing more, nothing less. Min lowered his head, but his eyes still held a patient and calm determination. Yes, I am just someone hired. But during the days I've spent here, I realized that Vi did nothing wrong. She deserves the support of her family instead of being forced to conform to impossible standards. Those words made Mrs. Huang hesitate for a moment, but she quickly turned away, her voice bitter. If you really care about this family, then you should step out of my daughter's life right now. Min did not reply. He only looked quietly at Vi. She was trying hard to hold back her tears, but he could clearly see the pain in her eyes. I don't need him to leave, Mom, Vi spoke, her voice trembling, but I definitely don't need you to accept him either, and he doesn't need your approval. But please remember, no matter what you say or do, I will not abandon my child. Mrs. Huang looked at Vi, her face showing a hint of sorrow, but she said nothing more. That night, Vi sat alone in her room, feeling as if all her strength had been drained. Min knocked and entered, holding a cup of hot water. He placed it on the table, looked at her for a long moment, and then spoke. I will not leave. If you need me, I'll stay until everything is over. For the first time, Vi broke down in tears in front of Min. But those tears were not just of pain, they were also of relief. The relief of knowing she was not completely alone. 3 days after that tense evening, Khanh Vi began to feel that everything was gradually falling into place. Although Mrs. Huang remained distant and Kan Huang occasionally threw spiteful remarks, Vi was determined to stand her ground. Khanh Vi also turned out to be more considerate than expected. He quietly helped Vi with small tasks around the house and maintained a calm demeanor despite the suspicious looks directed his way. But that peace did not last long. One afternoon, while Vi was working on her computer, the doorbell rang incessantly. She walked out to open the door and was stunned to see Thành Nam standing before her. He was as dashing as ever, his white shirt perfectly pressed, but his face showed unmistakable determination. Vi never thought she would have to face him again, especially not at a time like this. Nam? Why are you here? Vi asked, her voice cold. Nam raised an eyebrow, smiling slightly, but his familiar arrogance was hard to miss. Vi, we need to talk. There's nothing left to say between us. Vi replied firmly, intending to close the door, but Nam quickly held it open. I know you're pregnant, and I also know you're trying to hide it from everyone. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Nam's words made Vi freeze, her heart pounding, but she tried to stay calm. If you already know, so what? This child has nothing to do with you. Nam chuckled, his voice full of mockery. Nothing to do with me? We're talking about my child here. How can you deny that? I'm here to take responsibility. I want to be the father of this child. Vi looked at Nam, her eyes flashing with anger. Take responsibility? You think you have the right to say that? When I told you I was pregnant, what did you say? You told me to deal with it on my own and then disappeared, and now you want to play the role of a father? You really think I'll let you do that? Nam stepped forward, his voice lower and more serious. Vi, I was wrong. I admit it. But now I'm ready. I have everything it takes to take care of you and the baby. Think about it. Our child deserves a better life, doesn't it? Vi stood silent, rage rising within her. She was about to say something when suddenly Kwang Min appeared behind her. She's made it clear you have no place here anymore. Min stepped forward, positioning himself between Vi and Nam, his gaze calm but sharp. Nam was momentarily stunned, but then scoffed. So this is your husband, Vi? A guy who looks like he just stepped out of an auto repair shop? How amusing. Min did not react to the taunt, merely shrugged, his tone steady. Yes, I'm her husband, and I won't let anyone hurt her, whether it's you or anyone else. Nam smirked, his voice turning icy. All right then, let's see who can protect Vi better. I won't leave so easily. With that, Nam turned and walked away, leaving Vi and Min standing in a tense silence. Vi felt her whole body trembling, her lips pressed into a thin line. He really came back? Who does he think he is? Min placed a reassuring hand on Vi's shoulder, his voice gentle but firm. Don't worry, I won't let him do anything to you or the baby. In the days that followed, Nam began to use every possible way to exert pressure. He spread rumors that Vi was hiding a big secret, causing the neighbors to gossip nonstop. Not stopping there, Nam even hired a lawyer to prepare a lawsuit, demanding a DNA test and claiming his right to be the father of the child. When Vi received the notice, she was completely devastated. She couldn't believe that Nam could be so heartless, especially when she had tried to protect him from the prying eyes of others. I can't believe he would do this, Vi said, her voice trembling as she sat on the sofa. Vin sat across from her, his expression calm, but his eyes clearly showed concern. You have to stay strong. We'll find a way to handle this. But how? He has money, connections, and Vi's voice nearly broke into sobs. You have me, Min interrupted firmly. You're not alone in this. We'll fight to the end. The real confrontation began when Nam filed a lawsuit, demanding paternity rights and custody of the child. The first hearing attracted considerable public attention. In court, Nam's lawyer presented evidence to prove that Nam had the financial means and ability to provide a better upbringing for the child. But Min refused to be pushed into a corner. He stood up and spoke with sincerity and straightforwardness. I may not be wealthy, but I've been by Vi's side from the very beginning. I've taken care of her, worried about every meal, every prenatal checkup. I don't need to prove anything else. The love and responsibility I have for them is the answer. Min's heartfelt words brought silence to the courtroom. Vi looked at him, her eyes glistening with emotion. She never expected that Min could stand up and protect her so strongly. The trial dragged on for days, but in the end, the court decided that custody of the child would be given to Vi and Min, based on the love and dedication they had shown. Min was forced to withdraw. Defeated, after the trial, Min walked out with Vi. She looked at him, her eyes filled with profound gratitude. Thank you. Without you, I don't know what I would have done. Min smiled softly in response, his gaze gentle yet steadfast. I promised, remember? I will always be here to protect you and the baby. From that moment, Vi knew that no matter how many storms lay ahead, she was no longer alone. Vin was no longer just a fake husband. He had truly become a solid support in her life. Khanh Vi returned home after the trial, her heart relieved but her body exhausted. Kwang Min walked behind her, carrying the file bag. Though neither of them spoke, the silence between them was filled with comforting warmth. The legal battle with Thành Nam had finally ended, and Vi knew she couldn't have overcome it without Min by her side. Stepping into the house, Vi wasn't too surprised to see Mrs. Huang sitting on the sofa, her expression hard to read. Lately, her mother had stopped making cold remarks, but her attitude still hadn't completely changed. In contrast, Kan Hon stood nearby with his arms crossed, seemingly waiting to see how the next conversation would unfold. Is everything okay? Mrs. Huang asked, her eyes focused on Min more than her own daughter. It's fine, Mom, Vi replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The court has granted custody of the child to me and Min. Mrs. Huang nodded slightly and then unexpectedly sighed. I know this hasn't been easy for you, but Vi, are you sure you want to go through with this? Have you thought about the future? About the baby? Her mother's question made Vi hesitate for a moment, but before she could answer, Min spoke up. His voice was deep but steady. Ma'am, the baby's future is not only Vi's responsibility, it's also mine. I will do everything I can to protect her and the child. Mrs. Huang looked up at Min, her eyes scrutinizing him. She didn't say anything more, just silently stood up and went back to her room, leaving a heavy silence between the three of them. Kan Huang shrugged, not forgetting to throw out a mocking remark before leaving. Looks like you're pretty good at playing the part. Min didn't respond, only smiled faintly as if he was already too familiar with such words. Vi looked at him, guilt glimmering in her eyes. You don't have to put up with things like that, Vi said softly. Min shook his head. I already told you, this is no longer just a contract. Don't worry, I'm fine. In the days that followed, Vi focused on preparing for the baby's arrival. Kwangmin was always by her side, helping with everything from redecorating the baby's room to shopping for supplies. Although Min maintained his calm demeanor, Vi knew that what he did wasn't just out of responsibility. In his eyes, she could see genuine affection and sincere concern. Vi could feel the sincerity in Min, something she had never seen in anyone else, not even in Thành Nam during the days when she was blindly in love with him. One evening, as the family was having dinner, Mrs. Huang suddenly spoke up, breaking the silence. Min, she said, her tone still cold but no longer as harsh as before. Do you think you'll stay with this family forever, or will you leave once the contract ends? The question made both Vi and Min freeze. Vi glanced at Min, feeling her heart race. Min calmly set down his chopsticks, his gaze steady as he looked directly at Mrs. Huang without hesitation. Ma'am? Min replied, his voice calm yet sincere. I don't think whether I stay or leave is what truly matters. What's important is that Vi and the baby are safe and happy. If you think I'm not good enough, I'll prove it with my actions. Min's response left both Mrs. Huang and Kan Huang surprised. Mrs. Huang said nothing more, only gave a slight nod before continuing her meal, secretly relieved yet feeling a strange emotion rising in her heart. Since when had Min stopped being just a fake husband? Since when had his presence become something irreplaceable? A few weeks later, Khanh Vi went into labor. The pain came suddenly in the middle of the night, making her panic and call Min. He immediately drove her to the hospital, comforting her while staying calm to handle all the procedures. The entire way, Min never took his eyes off Vi, his hand tightly holding hers, conveying reassurance. Don't worry, everything will be all right, he said gently. Through the tears, Vi looked at Min, feeling like he was the only person she could rely on at that moment. The delivery went smoothly, but Vi had to stay in the hospital for a few days to recover. Min was always by her side, caring for her every meal and drink. When the baby was brought into the room, Min gently picked him up, his eyes filled with indescribable love. Hello there, he whispered, his voice full of emotion. Daddy's here. Those words left Vi speechless. She looked at Min, her heart overwhelmed with emotions she couldn't name. It wasn't just gratitude. It was a warm feeling slowly seeping into the depths of her heart. One evening, when the baby was sound asleep, Vi sat beside Min in the hospital corridor. She spoke softly. I never thought you would do this much, but you've truly made me see everything differently. Min turned to her with a gentle smile. I just did what I believed was right. You don't need to thank me. Vi shook her head softly, her eyes growing tender. I'm not just thanking you. I'm truly grateful that you came into my life. Her words made Min pause. He looked at Vi for a long time but said nothing more. The two of them sat there in silence, yet their hearts felt an unspoken bond. He understood that the path ahead was still full of challenges, but she also knew that with Min by her side, she would no longer have to face them alone. In that very moment, she realized that Min was not just a part of her life, he had truly become family to her and the baby. Khanh Vi returned home with her baby in her arms, her eyes reflecting a sense of fulfillment. For the first time in months, she felt like she could finally breathe freely. Khanh Vi carefully took the bag from her hands and opened the door. The familiar house greeted them with an unusual quietness, but to Vi, everything had changed. Right now, she was carrying a new piece of her life. The child was proof of all the storms she and Min had weathered together. Mrs. Wung sat in the living room, her eyes still bearing the usual sternness. However, when she saw Min carrying the baby inside, her gaze softened. Kan Huang stood nearby, clearly trying to hide his awkwardness. Although he was still a bit resentful about Min staying, time had gradually changed his attitude. My grandson, huh? Mrs. Wung spoke, her tone no longer as harsh as before. Min nodded, carefully placing the baby into the crib that had been prepared. Yes, ma'am. Who do you think he resembles more? Mrs. Huang stepped closer, attentively observing the baby. She said nothing, only reached out to gently stroke the baby's soft hair. A faint smile appeared on her face, but she quickly hid it by turning away. You should get some rest. Let Min take care of the baby. Khanh Vi chuckled softly, sensing the small but precious change in her mother's attitude. She knew that Mrs. Huang had not fully accepted everything yet, but this was a start. As for Min, he just quietly held the baby, a gentle smile on his lips. Perhaps, to him, this very moment was enough to make him feel happy. In the days that followed, Min devoted himself wholeheartedly to taking care of the baby, as if he were truly the child's father. From preparing milk and changing diapers to soothing the baby to sleep, he did everything skillfully and attentively. Many times Vi watched him from a distance, her heart filled with warmth. She never expected that the man she once considered merely an actor in their contract could bring her such a profound sense of safety and peace. One evening, as Vi was sitting and watching Min play with the baby, Mrs. Huang walked in. She sat down on the chair opposite Min, observing him for a long moment before suddenly speaking. "Min, I owe you an apology." Min looked up, visibly surprised by her words. "There's no need, ma'am. I was just doing what I should." "No." Mrs. Huang shook her head, her eyes softer than usual. "At first, I thought you were just an opportunist trying to take advantage of my daughter, but now I know I was wrong. You've proven through your actions that you truly care about Vi and the baby. You've done better than anyone I could have imagined." Min bowed his head slightly and replied softly, "Thank you for trusting me. I only want to fulfill my responsibility." Khanh Vi quietly observed their conversation, her heart pounding. Her mother's words felt like an official acknowledgement, something Vi had longed for. But at the same time, she realized something else. Min was no longer just a responsibility. He had truly become a part of her life. Life went on, but new challenges soon arose. The small auto repair shop that Min had just opened began facing difficulties. A major competitor in the area had deliberately lowered prices to lure away customers, and even spread rumors that Min's shop was unreliable. Min worked tirelessly to keep the business afloat, but the pressure kept mounting. Some days he returned home late, drenched in sweat, his eyes weary. Vi noticed it all. One evening, when Min returned home and sat quietly on the couch, Vi brought him a warm glass of water. "You can't keep working yourself to the bone like this," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm fine," Min replied, forcing a smile. But Vi wasn't convinced. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes serious. "You don't have to bear everything alone. Mom and I will help you. This isn't just your shop, it's also the future of our family." Min looked at Vi, an indescribable emotion welling up inside him. The words "our family" echoed in his mind, carrying with them a strange yet powerful strength. Min nodded slightly, feeling for the first time that he no longer had to fight alone. In the days that followed, Vi began to take part in managing the auto repair shop alongside Min. She proposed various ideas to improve services, expand marketing channels, and even suggested a special promotion to attract customers. Vi's sharpness and creativity quickly proved effective. Customers began to return, and the shop gradually stabilized. Min couldn't help but be surprised by Vi's intelligence and decisiveness. One evening, while they were organizing the books, Min suddenly spoke up. "Thank you." Vi looked up, slightly surprised. "For what?" "For everything. For not giving up. For believing in me." Min's eyes were so sincere that Vi couldn't look away. Vi smiled, her eyes soft. "You don't need to thank me. I should be the one to thank you for always being here. To me, you're not just someone who helped me through the storms, you're truly my family." Her words left them both speechless. In that moment, Vi realized without a doubt that her love for Min had become clearer than ever. And for Min, his heart had finally found a place to belong, a family he once thought he didn't deserve. The storms gradually subsided, and Vi knew that her journey with Min was still long, but the most important thing was that they no longer had to fight alone. Now, with love, trust, and hope, they were ready to face any challenge that lay ahead. Kanin, Vi returned home with the baby in her arms, her eyes reflecting contentment. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe easily. Kwang Min carefully took the bags from Vi's hands and opened the door. The familiar house welcomed them with an unusual silence, but for Vi, everything had changed. In that moment, she was carrying a new piece of her life. The child was living proof of all the hardships that she and Min had overcome together. Mrs. Huang was sitting in the living room, her gaze still as stern as ever. But when she saw Min carrying the baby into the house, her eyes softened. Kan Huang stood beside her, clearly trying to hide his awkwardness. He was still a bit uncomfortable about Min staying. However, time had gradually changed his attitude. "My son, Mrs. Huang spoke, her voice no longer as harsh as before. Mrs. Huang spoke, her voice no longer as harsh as before. Vi gently nodded and carefully placed the baby into the prepared cradle. "Yes, mother. Who do you think the baby resembles more?" Mrs. Huang stepped closer, attentively observing the child. She said nothing, only softly ran her hand over the baby's fine hair. A faint smile appeared on her face, but she quickly hid it by turning away. "Get some rest, dear. Let Min take care of the baby." Khanh Vi smiled slightly, sensing the small but precious change in her mother's attitude. She knew that Mrs. Huang had not completely accepted everything yet, but this was a start. As for Min, he silently held the baby, a gentle smile on his lips. For him, this moment alone was enough to feel happy. In the days that followed, Min threw himself into taking care of the baby as if he were the child's biological father. From making formula, changing diapers, to soothing the baby to sleep, he did everything skillfully and with devotion. Vi often watched him from afar, her heart filled with warmth. She never imagined that the man she once considered just a contract actor could bring her such safety and peace. One evening, as Vi was watching Min play with the baby, Mrs. Huang walked in. She sat down on the chair opposite Min, looked at him for a long time, and then suddenly spoke. "Mr. Min, I owe you an apology." Min looked up, clearly surprised by her words. Ma'am, that's not necessary. I only did what I should have done. No. Mrs. Kwong shook her head, her eye softer than usual. At first, I thought you were just an opportunist here to take advantage of my daughter, but now I see I was wrong. You have proven through your actions that you truly care about Vi and the baby. You have done better than anyone I could have imagined. Min bowed his head slightly and replied, Thank you for trusting me. I just want to fulfill my responsibilities. Khanh Vi quietly observed the conversation, her heart pounding. Her mother's words felt like an official acknowledgement, something Vi had longed for. But at the same time, she also realized another truth. Min was no longer just a responsibility. He had truly become a part of her life. Life went on, but new challenges soon arose. The small auto repair shop that Min had just opened began to face difficulties. A major competitor in the area deliberately lowered prices to lure customers away and even spread rumors that Min's shop was unreliable. Min worked tirelessly to keep the shop afloat, but the pressure only kept increasing. There were days when Min came home late, sweat dripping and eyes filled with exhaustion. Vi noticed it one evening when Min quietly sat down on the couch, his shoulders heavy with fatigue. She brought him a cup of warm water, her voice gentle but firm. You can't keep working yourself to the bone like this. I'm fine, Min replied, forcing a smile, but Vi didn't believe him. She placed her hand on his shoulder, her eyes serious. You don't have to carry everything alone. Mom and I will help you. This isn't just your shop, it's the future of our family. Min looked at Vi, a complex emotion rising within him. The words our family echoed in his mind, carrying a strange strength. He nodded, feeling for the first time that he didn't have to fight alone anymore. In the days that followed, Vi began to help manage the auto repair shop with Min. She proposed ideas to improve service, expand marketing channels, and even suggested special promotions to attract customers. Vi's quick thinking and creativity quickly showed results. Customers began to return and the shop gradually stabilized. Min couldn't help but be impressed by Vi's intelligence and decisiveness. One evening, as they were organizing the accounts, Min suddenly spoke. Thank you. Vi looked up, a bit surprised. For what? For everything. For not giving up. For believing in me. Min looked at Vi, his eyes so sincere that she couldn't look away. Vi smiled, her eyes soft with affection. You don't need to thank me. I should be thanking you too for always being here. To me, you're not just the person who helped me through the storms. You're truly my family. Those words left them both silent for a moment. In that instant, Vi realized that she no longer had any doubts. Her love for Min had become clearer than ever. As for Min, his heart had found its place, a family he once thought he didn't deserve. The storms gradually subsided, and Vi understood that their journey was still long, but the most important thing was that they no longer had to fight alone. Now, with love, trust, and hope, they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, we would like to express our sincere thanks to all of you for taking the time to listen to today's story. This is not only a journey of overcoming hardships, but also a profound lesson about love, patience, and faith. Through this story, we hope you have felt that in life, sometimes the things that seem impossible can indeed become reality when we put love and sincerity into them. Today's story also seeks to emphasize that no path is lined with roses. However, those who dare to move forward, to love, and to sacrifice will always find the light of happiness at the end of the journey. This is not merely a story about family, but also a reminder that empathy and sharing can transform our lives and the lives of those around us. We hope that through this story, you not only find empathy, but also appreciate the value of holding on to faith during the most challenging times. If you enjoyed this story and would like to support our channel, please show your appreciation by clicking the like button, sharing your thoughts and feelings in the comments section below. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button to ensure you never miss any meaningful stories in the future. Your love and support are truly invaluable motivations for us to continue our mission of bringing heartfelt, relatable, and meaningful stories to life. Once again, we sincerely thank you for being with us. We wish you moments of peace and happiness with your family and loved ones. Warm regards.